What would you do if the person meant to protect you, the one who should have cared for you, wanted you gone instead? Trapped in total darkness, abandoned miles from civilization, Ethan had two choices: give in to fear or fight for his life. And just when he thought all hope was lost, he uncovered something that would change everything. Dear family, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to support us and stay for this powerful story. Now let's begin. Total darkness. A suffocating, all-consuming blackness swallowed Ethan whole as the last sliver of light vanished behind the massive rocks. No way out, no way back. A thick cloud of dust rose as the final stone fell into place, clogging his lungs like razor-sharp needles. Ethan coughed violently, his chest burning, his eyes stinging. The deep, hollow scrape of stone against stone still echoed in his ears, the sound of his tomb sealing shut. No! No, no, no! His breath came ragged and uneven, his heartbeat pounding in his skull. He blinked furiously, willing his eyes to adjust, as if maybe, just maybe, he'd see something. But there was nothing. No light, no shapes, no way out. A wave of pure, unfiltered terror slammed into him. Ethan spun around, stumbling, then lunged toward the sealed entrance. His palms slammed against the cold, rough stone, fingers scraping along every crack, searching, desperate for a gap, a sliver of hope, anything. There was nothing. His mouth opened, and he screamed until his throat burned. "Carl, please, please, don't do this!" Silence. Ethan pounded his fists against the rock, the impact jarring up his arms. He clawed at the rough surface, nails tearing, skin scraping, pain flaring. But he didn't care. "Carl, open the door!" His own voice echoed back at him, a cruel, empty mockery. Then, footsteps. Outside. Ethan froze, pressing his ear against the stone. Slow, steady, walking away. Carl was leaving. "Carl, don't leave me here. I'll do whatever you want, I swear. Just don't go." The footsteps never stopped. He waited, held his breath. A tiny, desperate hope flickered inside him. Maybe Carl would stop. Maybe he'd change his mind. But then, one step, then another. Carl was gone. A choked sob ripped from Ethan's throat. His whole body shook violently, cold sweat trickling down his back like ice. He slammed his hands against the stone again. And again. Nothing changed. Carl was never coming back. A broken cry escaped his lips. His legs buckled, and he collapsed against the cold rock, his body curling inward, small and powerless. He was alone. Utterly, completely alone. Ethan sucked in a breath, but it wasn't enough. He gasped again, but his chest tightened. The air too thin, too cold. Nothing. No sound. Nothing but a deafening, suffocating silence. His trembling fingers fumbled inside his pocket, grasping for something, anything. A flashlight. He gripped it like a lifeline. Click. A faint, flickering glow pushed back the darkness, revealing rough stone walls. Dust swirled in the dim light, disturbed by his shaking breath. Despair, fear, panic. No! He couldn't let fear win. He forced himself to breathe. Once, then again. Think, Ethan. The entrance was sealed, but there had to be another way. And then, like a whisper in his mind, a voice, soft but steady. "Panic won't help you, sweetheart. When you're lost, you don't scream. You think." Ethan's body tensed. The memory came so vividly, so sharply that for a second, just a second, he wasn't in the cave. Sunlight streamed through towering pine trees, dappling the forest floor in golden green. A soft breeze whispered through the canopy, carrying the crisp scent of fresh earth and fallen leaves. Beneath their feet, gravel crunched with every step, blending with the distant call of birds. Lisa walked ahead, her auburn hair catching the afternoon light. She moved with a quiet confidence, her strides easy, steady, like someone who belonged here. There was a calmness about her, the kind that made the world feel safe, even out in the wild. Ethan, only 8 at the time, bounced along beside her, his slightly oversized backpack bobbing with each step. He wasn't just walking, he was exploring, scanning the ground, the trees, the sky, just like his mother had taught him. Lisa suddenly stopped, crouching beside the trail. She motioned for Ethan to join her. "Look here, buddy," she said, her voice soft but filled with excitement. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, his wide eyes following her fingertips as they traced a faint set of tracks pressed into the dirt. He furrowed his brow, concentrating, trying to think the way she did. "A deer?" he guessed, glancing up. Lisa grinned, ruffling his hair. "That's my boy. See how the tips point forward? That means it was moving that way." She gestured up the trail. "If we follow carefully, we might see where it went." Ethan beamed, soaking in every word. These hikes were his favorite thing in the world. Just him and his mom, learning, discovering, belonging. A gust of wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves above. The moment should have felt perfect. But then, a shadow at the edge of the clearing. Carl. He stood a few yards away, hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket, watching them. Ethan hesitated, his smile faltering just slightly. He didn't know why. He turned back to his mother, hoping she hadn't noticed. Lisa, as always, pretended everything was fine. She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans, and flashed Carl a warm smile, as if nothing had changed. "See anything interesting?" she asked lightly. Carl shrugged. "Just trees." He didn't move closer, didn't kneel beside them, didn't join in. He just stood there, apart, always apart. Ethan studied him carefully, trying to read his expression. But Carl was impossible to read. His face gave nothing away. Lisa didn't push. She never did. Instead, she looked back down at Ethan and nodded toward the trail ahead. "Come on, let's keep moving." Ethan scrambled to his feet, shaking off the uneasy feeling. He wanted things to feel normal again, but as they walked, he couldn't help but glance back. Carl followed at a distance, his footsteps slow, measured. Ethan didn't understand him. Not yet, but he wanted to. He wanted Carl to be a part of this, a part of them. Because Carl was his mother's husband now, and that had to mean something, right? The morning began like any other. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the small kitchen, mingling with the crisp autumn air, seeping in through the slightly cracked window. Sunlight spilled across the tiled floor, casting warm golden streaks that danced along the countertops. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his chin resting in his palm, absent-mindedly stirring his cereal. The spoon clinked softly against the bowl as he watched his mother move about the kitchen, humming quietly under her breath. She looked tired, more than usual. The circles beneath her eyes had darkened over the past few weeks, her movements slower, less certain. "Mom, you okay?" His voice was light, but there was a thin thread of worry woven beneath it. Lisa paused, leaning against the counter, as if the simple act of standing had become too much. She blinked, as if she hadn't even realized she had stopped moving. Then, with a small shake of her head, she turned back toward him, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired." She reached for the coffee pot, but as her fingers brushed the handle, she suddenly swayed. The world shifted. One second she was standing, and the next, a sharp, sickening thud echoed through the kitchen. The coffee pot slipped from her grasp, shattering against the tile, sending steaming liquid rushing across the floor. But Ethan barely registered the sound, barely noticed the sting of hot liquid splattering against his bare legs. His mother lay crumpled on the ground, motionless. "Mom?" His voice came out small, strangled, barely more than a whisper. She didn't move. The chair scraped violently against the floor as he shoved away from the table, his heartbeat slamming against his ribs. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands shaking as he reached for her shoulder, giving it a small shake. "Mom? Wake up!" Nothing. A sharp, terrifying kind of panic gripped him, turning his limbs to lead. His breath came fast and shallow, his chest tightening. "No! No, this wasn't happening." A shadow appeared in the doorway. Carl. He stood there for a moment, his expression unreadable, his face eerily still. Then without a word he strode forward, stepping over the broken shards of glass. Ethan's eyelids fluttered, a faint groan slipping past her lips. She just collapsed, Ethan choked out, his voice barely working. I don't know what happened, she just… Carl didn't waste time. He crouched down, scooped Lisa into his arms with a strained grunt, and rose to his feet. Get your shoes, Ethan, he ordered, already moving toward the door. We're going to the hospital. Ethan scrambled to his feet, nearly slipping on the spilled coffee. His hands fumbled as he shoved his feet into his sneakers, his fingers shaking so badly he couldn't tie the laces. By the time he reached the car, Carl was already in the driver's seat. Lisa slumped against the passenger side, her head lolling against the window. Her face looked paler than ever, her breathing shallow. Ethan yanked open the back door, barely getting in before Carl slammed his foot against the gas pedal. The tires screeched against the pavement as they tore down the driveway, the world outside blurring into a mess of colors and motion. Ethan clutched the seat in front of him, his stomach twisting into tight, painful knots. His mother was sick, and he had never felt more helpless in his entire life. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and something sterile, something lifeless. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh, artificial glow, buzzing faintly in the silence that stretched through the waiting area. Ethan sat in one of the stiff plastic chairs, his sneakers barely touching the floor, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. His fingers ached from how hard he was gripping them, but he didn't loosen his hold. He couldn't. Carl sat beside him, his arms crossed over his chest, one knee bouncing impatiently. He hadn't spoken much since they'd arrived, only answering the nurse's questions with clipped, detached responses. Ethan had asked once, just once, if Lisa was going to be okay. Carl hadn't answered. Now they waited. Every time the doors leading to the exam room swung open, Ethan's heart leapt into his throat, his stomach twisting itself into impossible knots. But each time, it was never the doctor he was waiting for. Never the answer he needed. He wanted to move, to do something, but he didn't know what. So he waited. Finally, after what felt like hours, the door creaked open again. A man in a white coat stepped out, his expression unreadable. He scanned the room before locking eyes with Carl. Mr. Weaver? Carl stood immediately, his movements quick, almost mechanical. Ethan scrambled to his feet beside him, pulse hammering. The doctor's gaze flickered toward Ethan, then back to Carl. Let's speak in private. Ethan's stomach dropped. No, he blurted out. Tell me, I need to know. Carl exhaled sharply through his nose, his jaw tightening. The doctor hesitated, then nodded slowly. Ethan barely noticed as Carl placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, guiding him forward. The doctor led them down a quiet hallway, stopping just outside a small consultation room. His eyes softened slightly as he turned to Ethan. Your mother is stable, he began, his voice calm, measured. But the tests we ran, they confirmed something. The world tilted slightly beneath Ethan's feet. She has cancer, the doctor continued gently. Advanced. It spread beyond what we hoped. The prognosis… He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's not good. Not good. The words echoed in Ethan's head, hollow and meaningless. He shook his head, the floor suddenly feeling too far away, the air too thick. But you can fix it, right? People beat cancer all the time. The doctor hesitated. We'll do everything we can to make her comfortable. Ethan's chest clenched, something inside him twisting painfully, violently. No, this wasn't real. This wasn't happening. Carl said nothing. Ethan turned to him, searching for something, anything in his face. But Carl's expression was blank, unreadable. He didn't ask any questions, didn't demand more information. He just stood there, arms crossed, fingers tapping against his bicep like he was thinking about something else entirely. Ethan felt like screaming. A sharp, shuddering breath tore through his chest. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus on the doctor. How long? He whispered. The doctor's eyes flickered with sympathy. Months, maybe less. The words slammed into him, stealing every ounce of air from his lungs. His mother didn't have years, didn't even have one. His head spun, his stomach churned. The room was too small, too bright, too quiet. A soft knock broke the moment. A nurse stood in the doorway, offering a small smile. "She's awake," she said gently. "You can see her now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He ran. Down the hall, past the reception desk, his feet pounding against the tile floor. He burst through the doorway, skidding to a stop beside his mother's hospital bed. Lisa turned her head, and when she saw him, she smiled. A tired, weak smile. But still his mom. Ethan's throat clenched. He wanted to be strong, but as he reached for her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers, all he could do was hold on. The days blurred together. The hospital room became their world, a sterile, artificial place where time moved too fast and too slow all at once. Ethan refused to leave his mother's side. Lisa's body had grown weaker, her once bright eyes dimmed by exhaustion, but she never let it show. Not to him. She still smiled, still brushed her fingers through his hair when he laid his head against her bedside, still whispered reassurances even as her voice grew thin. But Ethan wasn't a little kid. Not anymore. He could see the truth in the way her hands trembled when she reached for her water, in the way her breath came shallower with each passing day, in the way the nurses looked at him with quiet pity. Lisa Weaver was running out of time, and so, one evening, when the sky outside her window burned gold and orange, she made a choice. She waited until Ethan had finally fallen asleep, curled up in the chair beside her bed, his small hand still wrapped around hers. Then she lifted her gaze to Carl, standing stiffly in the corner of the room. Her voice was soft, but firm. "We need to talk." Carl's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't move. Lisa took a slow breath. "Ethan is going to need you." Something flickered across Carl's face. He shifted his weight, his fingers tapping against his arm, but he said nothing. Lisa didn't look away. "Promise me," she said. "Promise me you'll take care of him." Carl exhaled sharply through his nose. "Lisa, promise me." Her grip on his hand was weak, but her voice wasn't. A long silence stretched between them. Then finally Carl nodded. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, relief washing over her, but there was still one last thing. She turned her head toward the bedside table, her fingers barely brushing against the folder resting there. "The life insurance," she murmured. Carl's eyes flicked toward the folder. Lisa didn't see the way his expression shifted, the way his shoulders tensed ever so slightly. "It's for Ethan," she continued, "for his future." Carl nodded again, but something inside him had already started to unravel. He had known about the policy, of course. He had even signed the papers with her. But he hadn't really thought about what it meant. Now, standing in the dim hospital light, watching the woman in the bed slip away, the reality of it settled into his bones like a slow, creeping weight. Ethan would be taken care of. Ethan would have everything. Carl would have nothing. Lisa sighed, her fingers still resting against the folder. Her eyes fluttered closed, and for the first time in days, her breathing was peaceful. Carl stared down at her, his mind somewhere else entirely. The funeral was small. The town gathered in quiet reverence, offering hushed condolences, hands on shoulders, murmured prayers. Lisa had been loved. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it. They spoke of her kindness, her laughter, the way she had touched lives in the simplest yet most profound ways. Ethan barely heard them. He stood beside her casket, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his suit jacket, his fingers curling into fists so tight they ached. His eyes stayed locked on the polished wood, refusing to look up, refusing to acknowledge the hole in his world. It felt unreal. Any moment now, she'd walk through the church doors, that warm, easy smile on her lips, ruffling his hair, telling him to stop slouching. But she didn't. She wouldn't. A gentle hand touched his shoulder. Mrs. Henderson, their neighbor. "Sweetheart, if you need anything..." Ethan nodded stiffly, but he didn't speak. He had nothing to say. Carl stood a few feet away, silent, his expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken much since Lisa died. At first, Ethan thought it was grief, but as the days stretched on, Carl's silence began to feel different, distant, detached. And then, one by one, people stopped coming. The casseroles stopped arriving. The phone calls grew less frequent. Life moved forward for everyone else, except for Ethan, and except for Carl. The house, once filled with Lisa's warmth, became a hollow, echoing thing. Carl drifted from room to room like a shadow, barely acknowledging Ethan's presence. He spent long hours in his study, door shut, whiskey glass in hand. When he did emerge, his eyes were distant, calculating, as if he were looking at something just beyond the room, something only he could see. Ethan didn't understand it. Not yet, but Carl did. Because for the first time since Lisa's death, Carl wasn't just thinking about his loss. He was thinking about the life insurance. He had stared at the folder for days, unopened, as if just knowing what was inside had a weight of its own. But now he picked it up. He unfolded the paperwork with careful precision, his fingers smoothing out the crisp edges. And then he read. The numbers stared back at him. A fortune. More than he had ever seen in his lifetime. Enough to start over, to leave this town behind, to live the life he'd always imagined for himself. But the money wasn't his. It was Ethan's. A slow, suffocating heat crept up Carl's spine. His grip on the paper tightened. His pulse pounded in his ears. And then the thought came. Unbidden, unwelcome. But once it arrived, it wouldn't leave. If only the kid wasn't here. Carl closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't push the thought away. The change in Carl came suddenly. For weeks, he had been a ghost in the house. Silent, brooding, lost in his own thoughts. His movements were mechanical, his presence barely noticeable, as if he had already begun fading into the background of Ethan's life. But then, one evening, something shifted. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, picking at the reheated leftovers Mrs. Henderson had dropped off earlier that week. The house was quiet except for the occasional ticking of the clock above the stove. Then Carl spoke. "You ever been camping, kid?" The words caught Ethan off guard. He looked up, blinking in surprise. Carl was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching him with a look Ethan couldn't quite place. "What?" "Camping," Carl repeated. "Out in the wilderness. Just you and me." Ethan hesitated, unsure how to respond. Carl had never shown interest in doing anything with him before. In fact, for the past few weeks, he had barely acknowledged Ethan at all. But now here he was, talking about a trip. Just the two of them. Something inside Ethan stirred. Hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe Carl was finally trying. Ethan set his fork down, straightening in his seat. "Really?" Carl shrugged. "Why not?" It wasn't much of an answer, but Ethan latched onto it anyway. Lisa had always talked about taking him camping one day, but they had never gotten the chance. The idea of finally going, even if it was with Carl, sent a flicker of excitement through him. "Yeah," he said, nodding quickly. Yeah, that sounds great." Carl's lips twitched upward, something resembling a smile. "Good. We'll leave in the morning." Ethan barely slept that night. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than grief, other than the crushing weight of loneliness. He felt hopeful. By sunrise, he was already packed, stuffing extra socks and a flashlight into his backpack, making sure he had everything he thought he'd need. Carl was waiting by the truck when Ethan came outside, a large duffel bag tossed in the back. "Hop in," he said, opening the driver's side door. Ethan climbed into the passenger seat, gripping the straps of his backpack as Carl started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, and they pulled out of the driveway, leaving the quiet house behind. For the first hour, neither of them spoke much. The radio played softly, the road stretched endlessly before them, and Carl kept his eyes fixed ahead, his hands steady on the wheel. Ethan didn't mind. He was just happy to be here. But as the miles rolled by, something about the drive began to feel off. The houses and familiar landmarks disappeared. The road turned from pavement to dirt. The trees grew thicker, the sky overhead fading to a deeper shade of blue. Ethan glanced at Carl. "Where are we going?" "Someplace special," Carl said, his voice even. Ethan nodded, forcing himself to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. Carl wouldn't take him somewhere dangerous. Carl was finally trying, right? The drive stretched endlessly. The paved roads had long disappeared, replaced by a winding dirt path that carved its way deeper into the wilderness. Towering trees lined both sides, their gnarled branches stretching overhead, casting long skeletal shadows across the truck's dusty windshield. The air had changed too. Thicker, heavier, untouched by the world beyond this place. Ethan shifted in his seat, glancing toward Carl. His stepfather's hands gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles slightly pale. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, his face unreadable. "How much farther?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. Carl didn't answer at first. Then after a beat too long, he said, "Almost there." Something about the way he said it made Ethan's stomach twist. The road narrowed until it wasn't much of a road at all, just a rugged path through dense forest, barely wide enough for the truck to squeeze through. The trees closed in, their trunks thick and ancient. It was clear that no one had been out here for a long time. Ethan tried to shake the unease creeping up his spine. Maybe this was just a hidden spot Carl had discovered. Maybe it was his way of making this trip special. But then the truck rolled to a stop. Carl killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, the distant sound of birds and rustling leaves the only thing breaking the stillness. Carl exhaled and turned to Ethan. "We walk from here." Ethan hesitated for only a second before nodding. He grabbed his backpack, slinging it over his shoulders, and followed Carl out of the truck. The ground was uneven, the scent of damp earth rising beneath his boots. They hiked in silence deeper into the trees, the thick canopy above swallowing what remained of the afternoon light. Carl moved with purpose, never hesitating, as if he had walked this path before. After what felt like miles, Carl finally slowed. Ethan nearly bumped into him, stopping just in time to see what lay ahead. A cave. Its entrance yawned open at the base of a rocky hillside, jagged and dark, as if the earth itself had been torn apart. Ethan felt a small thrill of excitement, despite his exhaustion. A real cave. Carl turned to him, the faintest hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Go on, take a look." Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved forward, stepping over loose rocks as he ducked inside. The air was cool, damp. His footsteps echoed faintly against the uneven walls. The cave stretched deeper than he expected, tunnels branching off into unseen depths. The walls were lined with strange ancient markings, scratches in the stone that didn't look natural. His chest tightened. "Carl, look at this." Crash. The sound of tumbling rocks. A deep, hollow thud. Ethan whirled around. His heart stopped, and Carl wasn't coming back. The memory shattered, replaced by the bone-deep chill of the air pressing against his skin. "Don't panic." Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. His breath slowed, his pulse still thundering but steadier now. He had to move. His trembling fingers reached for his backpack. He tore it open, fingers fumbling through its contents. Flashlight, water bottle, pocket knife. Not much, but enough. He flicked on the flashlight. The weak beam trembled across the rough stone walls, illuminating the dust floating in the stale air. He forced himself to look, not at what trapped him, but at what surrounded him. That's when he saw them. Thin, carved lines in the stone. Not random scratches, not cracks. Arrows. His breath caught. His fingers traced over the carvings, rough and uneven, but unmistakable, pointing deeper into the cave. A sign, a choice. Stay here and wait for starvation, or trust the arrows, and move forward. Ethan's grip tightened around the flashlight. His legs shook, but he took a step, then another. Then, without looking back, he followed the signs into the dark. The deeper Ethan went, the more the cave changed. The air grew cooler, carrying a damp, musty scent that clung to his skin. Each breath felt heavier, thick with dust and time. His footsteps echoed strangely, bouncing off unseen walls, making the darkness feel endless. He kept his eyes on the carved arrows, following their silent guidance. The path twisted and dipped, narrowing in places, forcing him to squeeze through jagged openings. His flashlight flickered weakly, the battery struggling, and he tried not to think about what would happen if it died. Then, his foot struck something solid. Not rock, not dirt, something else. Ethan froze. His pulse quickened. He crouched, sweeping his flashlight over the ground. At first, it looked like nothing more than a mound of earth, but as he brushed away the dirt with trembling fingers, something sharp and unnatural caught the light. Wood, old, splintered wood, half buried beneath layers of time. His breath came faster. His fingers worked quickly, digging through the loose soil, revealing more. A wooden chest, bound with rusted iron. Ethan swallowed hard. His hands, filthy and shaking, found the edge of the lid. He hesitated only for a second before forcing it open. The lid creaked open, releasing a stale breath of air, ancient, untouched. Ethan's heart pounded as the flashlight's trembling beam illuminated gold. For a moment, he forgot everything. The fear, the exhaustion, the bruises lining his arms from scrambling through the cave. Coins, hundreds of them, stacked in uneven piles, their once brilliant surfaces dulled by time. Beneath them lay maps, yellowed, edges curled with decay. Jewelry, trinkets, relics from a world long gone. A history buried deep beneath the earth. Ethan swallowed deeply. His mind spun, struggling to process everything he was seeing. Who had left this here? Why? This wasn't just treasure. This was a chance to change his life. A fierce hope ignited within him. His fingers reached out, brushing against a coin. The metal was cold, rough against his skin. He picked it up, rolling it between his fingers, feeling the unbelievable weight of it. His throat tightened. "Mom, I wish you could see this." The words barely escaped, a whisper swallowed by the vast, hollow silence of the cave. But then, a flicker, a faint tremor in the flashlight's glow. Ethan's pulse stilled. He glanced down. The beam shuddered, a weak, erratic pulse of light. Then another. A chill crawled up his spine. "No, no, no!" He gave the flashlight a quick shake. The bulb fought to stay alive, dimming, then stabilizing, just barely. But it wouldn't last, and when it died, he would be alone in the dark. The treasure, the gold, the maps, the jewels, meant nothing now. If he didn't find a way out before the light disappeared, he was as good as dead. His breath came faster, chest tightening, fingers curling into a fist around the coin before shoving it into his pocket. The arrows. He had to follow the arrows. His flashlight flickered again, weaker this time, barely pushing back the shadows. Ethan spun away from the chest, from the gold, from the lies of fortune that meant nothing if he didn't make it out. He ran. The cave was alive, not with sound, not with movement, but with something else, something darker, something primal. A slow, suffocating presence that wrapped around Ethan like a second skin, pressing into his ribs, curling around his throat. He could feel it watching. Not a person, not a creature, just the weight of the earth itself, reminding him how small he was, how fragile, how easily forgotten. His flashlight flickered again. Ethan gritted his teeth and forced himself forward. His legs ached, his arms shook, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not now. The tunnel narrowed, squeezing inward, forcing him to drop to his knees, then his elbows. He pressed his body low, inching forward, sharp rocks biting into his skin. The air was thick here, damp and stale, untouched by the outside world for who knows how long. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out the sound of his own breathing. Then, the light sputtered. A violent flicker, then another. Ethan froze. No, not now. He gave the flashlight a hard shake. The bulb dimmed, struggled, then went out. Total darkness. Ethan's breath hitched. His fingers clenched around the useless flashlight. He was blind. The blackness swallowed everything, stretching endlessly in every direction. He blinked, but it didn't matter. His eyes couldn't adjust. Panic clawed at his throat. His chest tightened. "Breathe, sweetheart." His mother's voice. Software. Steady. "You don't need to see. You just need to feel." Ethan swallowed hard and stretched his hands forward. Slow. Careful. His fingertips brushed against stone. Cold, rough, uneven. He ran his palms along the walls, feeling for the markings. The arrows. They were still there, leading him forward. So he moved. He crawled, inch by inch, the cave pressing against him, dust choking the back of his throat. His arms burned, his knees throbbed, but he didn't stop. And then he saw it, a faint glow. Small, distant, a pinprick of light ahead. His breath caught. He scrambled forward faster, desperation giving him strength. The passage widened, but his body felt heavy, so heavy. His limbs screamed for rest, exhaustion threatening to drag him down. No! Keep going. The light grew, brighter, closer. Ethan clawed his way toward it, fingers gripping rock, lungs burning, muscles trembling. One more push, one more pull. Then, he was out. Blinding daylight exploded around him. Ethan tumbled forward, crashing onto the rocky ground, gasping, choking on fresh air. The warmth of the sun seared his skin, his body trembling against the shock of it. He lay there, his chest rising and falling in uneven, ragged breaths. Alive. He was alive. The forest stretched endlessly before Ethan, but he kept moving. His legs trembled with each step, muscles screaming for relief, but he couldn't stop now. His clothes were torn, his arms scraped raw, dirt caked beneath his fingernails. His throat burned with thirst, his breath ragged. Every inch of him ached. But he was alive, and Carl was going to pay. The trees thinned ahead, and then a clearing. Ethan nearly collapsed in relief. Just beyond the clearing, past a winding dirt road, stood a ranger station. A squat wooden building, its windows glowing warmly against the early evening sky. With the last of his strength, Ethan staggered forward. The door creaked open as a uniformed ranger stepped outside, stretching after what must have been a long shift. When he saw Ethan, he froze. "My God," the ranger muttered, rushing forward. "Kid, are you all right?" Ethan swayed on his feet, struggling to find his voice. So much had happened. Too much. His lips cracked as he tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. The ranger caught him by the shoulders, steadying him. "What happened to you? Where's your guardian?" Ethan forced himself to meet the man's eyes. His entire body shook, but his voice didn't waver. "My stepdad tried to kill me." The words left his mouth like a blade slicing through the air. "He left me in a cave to die." The ranger stiffened. His expression darkened. And then he reached for his radio. Meanwhile, at the sheriff's office, Carl Weaver was playing the role of a lifetime. He sat at the station's wooden desk, his face buried in his hands, voice breaking at all the right moments. "I don't know what happened, Sheriff," he choked out. "We were camping and he just ran off. I searched everywhere, but he was just gone." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, eyeing Carl carefully. "That boy's been missing nearly a full day," he said, his voice even. "And you didn't call us sooner?" Carl let out a ragged sigh, shaking his head. "I didn't want to believe it. I kept thinking I'd find him. I failed him." He let the last word hang in the air, filled with guilt, regret, performance. The sheriff studied him a moment longer, then exhaled. "All right, Carl, we've got folks out looking. The door slammed open. Every head in the station turned. And there, standing in the doorway, covered in dirt, bruised but unbroken, was Ethan. Carl's face drained of color. Ethan locked eyes with him, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid. The room fell silent. The air grew thick. Carl's fingers twitched against his knee. His jaw tensed, eyes darting toward the exit, an animal looking for an escape. Ethan stepped forward. The whole station seemed to hold its breath. And then, Ethan spoke. He didn't lose me. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a knife. He left me to die. The silence in the station stretched, thick and suffocating. Carl sat frozen, his face pale, his fingers gripping the edge of the desk as if steadying himself. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. The sheriff leaned forward, his sharp gaze never leaving Carl. Watching, waiting. Carl swallowed hard. Then with a weak, forced chuckle, he finally found his voice. "That's not true," he stammered, shaking his head. "The boy is confused. He must have fallen, hit his head. He doesn't know what he's saying." Ethan didn't flinch. He stood there, battered and exhausted, every muscle in his body aching. But his voice, steady, unshaken. "I remember everything." Carl's eyes darted toward the exit. "I remember you sealing the cave," Ethan continued, his voice clear, firm, undeniable. I heard the rocks falling. I heard your footsteps walking away. A muscle in Carl's jaw twitched. He let out a forced scoff. This is ridiculous. Sit down, the sheriff said. Carl hesitated for only a second too long. Then slowly he obeyed. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Why'd you take him out there, Carl? Carl let out a sharp breath. I already told you. We were camping. The sheriff didn't blink. Just the two of you? Yes. No one else knew where you were? No. The sheriff nodded. And yet somehow the boy finds his way back, after being trapped in a cave, with the entrance sealed shut. Carl's face twitched. His fingers curled against his knee. The sheriff leaned back, arms crossed. That's a hell of a thing, isn't it? A knock at the door. One of the rangers stepped inside, his expression unreadable. In his hands, a report. We checked the cave, the ranger said. Entrance was sealed with freshly displaced rocks. Someone moved them there, on purpose. Carl's breath hitched. Another ranger followed, a folder tucked beneath her arm. She placed it on the sheriff's desk, flipping it open. The life insurance policy, she said. Every penny goes to Ethan. Silence. Then, Carl moved. A flash of motion. He surged to his feet, knocking the chair backward, his breath coming too fast, too sharp. This is insane, he shouted, his voice cracking. You think I do that? He's lying. The handcuffs clicked. The sheriff didn't hesitate. In one smooth motion, he caught Carl's wrist, twisting it behind his back as the cuffs snapped into place. Carl thrashed, but it was useless. His fate was sealed. Ethan watched, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths as Carl was hauled to his feet. Carl's wild, desperate gaze finally landed on Ethan, and for the first time, there was fear in his eyes. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't say a word. He just watched as justice was served. The house was warm, not just in the way sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, painting golden streaks on the wooden floors, but in the way it felt. The laughter of children echoed from the backyard. The scent of homemade bread drifted from the kitchen, where his foster mother, Margaret, hummed softly as she kneaded dough. The walls weren't bare and empty like Carl's house had been. They were filled with photographs, memories of a life well lived, of a family that welcomed him in without hesitation. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan didn't feel like an outsider. He wasn't a burden. He was home. It had been months since Carl's arrest. The trial was still ahead, but Ethan didn't need to hear the verdict to know that Carl was never coming back. The weight that had pressed against his chest for so long, the fear, the loneliness, had finally begun to lift. One afternoon, he sat at the kitchen table, running his fingers over a piece of paper. The finalized documents confirming that his mother's life insurance money was his. Carl had tried to steal it, had been willing to kill for it, but Lisa's love had protected him even in death. The money sat untouched in a trust fund, secured for his future. But it wasn't the only thing left behind. The treasure, the weight of the coin in his pocket felt heavier now, not just in metal, but in meaning. It wasn't just gold. It was a piece of history, hidden away for centuries, waiting for someone to find it. And he had found it, but it didn't belong to him alone. So, one quiet afternoon, he made a decision. The museum smelled of polished wood and old paper, the air thick with history. Ethan walked through its grand halls, past towering exhibits of ancient artifacts, until he reached the curator's office. The man listened in stunned silence as Ethan told his story. Not the whole truth, but enough. That he had stumbled upon something lost to time, something that deserved to be seen by the world. Weeks later, he stood in front of the glass display case, staring at the treasures he had once held in his own hands. The plaque beside them read, "Recovered by Ethan Weaver," a remarkable discovery gifted in honor of his mother, Lisa Weaver. Ethan smiled. The museum had insisted on rewarding him, a portion of the finder's fee placed into his fund, but that wasn't what mattered. This was his way of honoring her. A whisper of wind brushed against his cheek, warm despite the cool air conditioning. His eyes drifted shut. "I did it, Mom." And for the first time in a long time, he felt whole. What truly defines a treasure? Is it gold, buried beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered? Or is it something far greater, something unseen, something that lingers long after the world has taken everything else away? Ethan's story is not just about survival. It is about the unshakable power of love, the strength of the human spirit, and the choices that define us. Carl believed that wealth was everything, that if he could eliminate the one thing standing in his way, he would finally be free. But greed is a hollow thing. It devours, consumes, and in the end, leaves nothing behind but ruin. Lisa, on the other hand, knew the truth. Love, real love, does not die, even when life is cruel. It lingers in the lessons we teach, in the values we pass down, in the quiet whispers of encouragement that echo long after we're gone. Lisa never lived to see her son's triumph, but she was with him in every breath he took, in every decision he made. Not through wealth, but through wisdom. Not through presence, but through faith. And because of that, Ethan survived. He survived not just because he was strong, but because he held on to something far more valuable than gold: hope. And in the end, hope led him forward. Hope rebuilt his life. Hope carried him from the depths of darkness back into the light. So I ask you, what is your greatest treasure? Is it something you can hold in your hands? Or is it something deeper, something untouchable? Faith, love, resilience. Perhaps your most valuable possession is not something you own, but something you carry within you. If you've ever faced a moment where faith and perseverance pulled you through, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Let's remind the world that even in its darkest moments, there is always a way forward. And if Ethan's journey moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength or the love of someone who shaped you, then don't let the story end here. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories of resilience, survival, and the extraordinary power of the human spirit. Because the greatest treasures aren't buried beneath the earth. They're within us all.